What keeps you awake at night?
Sea levels are rising globally.
Fears fueled by horror stories.
Among the worst flu season in a decade, and it hasn't peaked yet.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous.
Another series of deadly terror attacks.
Because you know that thing your brain does in the middle of the night? This crazy thing where it takes a small problem and it just makes it enormous?
Boy is chewing on the door thing again.
Cats.
Yeah.
So I made a trip up to Fresno, really solely with the purpose of going to see a place that sold a 3-foot-long burrito.
Was that the goal of going?
Yeah, honestly, that was like the whole purpose and intent is we wanted to go to the 3-foot burrito place. Got a nice face meat burrito.
Explain the face meat part to me.
So the waitress asked, like, what kind of meat would you want? And said cabeza, and cabeza is my favorite one. It was the one I'd always get when I got tacos in Santa Ana. And Jack's like, I didn't know you like brain. I'm like, no, it's not brain, it's face meat. And he's like, it's cabeza, that's head. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's talking about, like, the meat that wraps around the head and jowls and everything like that. But because it's really, like, tough because it's a high use area.
Yeah.
They have to like stew it like stew meat, so it's like
Whoa.
tender and delicious. If it is brains, please don't fucking tell me that. Do not at me on Twitter and tell me that. My life will be better assuming that it's jowl meat.
I feel like if it was brains, you'd know. But
yeah. But hey, I'd rather not if I'm wrong. So, and so then. Well, I guess Zach, my friend, had knowledge that there was a cat sanctuary just south of Fresno.
See, this would be my whole purpose in going. This right here.
Yeah. I you know, he said, like, it's a cat sanctuary. I assumed there'd be, like, 20, 30 cats. We show up to a literal ranch, like a 5-acre ranch.
Dope.
And it is, like, a fully gated ranch. And there are just cats roaming the entire ranch. In total, there were probably over 100 adult cats just roaming around.
This is my heaven.
And we went to the kitten trailer, and the kitten trailer itself probably had like 40 to 50 kittens. And I loved them so much. And
can you adopt them, or is this like where they live forever?
No, you can adopt all of them. It's a cat sanctuary. And they're all, like, vaccinated and neutered and spayed.
Oh, my God.
And they're all very good.
What's this place called? Do you remember?
Ooh. I think it's the Cat Haven on Kings.
Very cool.
On the Kings or something like that in Fresno. And it was incredible. And I loved it. And... I brought some great energy home with me. We had it was like a 3.5-hour drive one way.
Oof.
And I guess for me, but for them, then they had to drive back down to Orange County. So for them, it was a 4-hour drive.
Yeah, that's rough.
And then I got home and immediately ruined my mood by watching this documentary.
Ma'am, it is, in case you haven't read the title of this episode.
Which... Why? I think there was like a period of time where we would like say, oh, surprise, we're doing this today. And it's like, it's in the description.
It sure is.
We're dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're reviewing the new movie that came out, The Great Hack.
It came out like less than a week ago, right?
Yeah, this is like one of the first documentaries we did, or even movies that we've done that's not like crazy old, solely because it's available on streaming services that we already have and pay for.
Yeah, generally speaking, we watch movies that one of us has seen already, and I think this is one of the first ones.
For it.
Right, this is one of the first ones where we both went in blind, and oh boy,
I am so mad.
I think this one is going to end up being less of a movie review and more of just like a breakdown of how we feel about the information that we received yesterday.
And I like wholeheartedly, you should watch the documentary ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because we can like summarize key points, but like it's not going to hit as hard as watching it and then understanding our comments.
Right.
Also because I don't want to just like regurgitate the points, like watch the film. It was very well directed, very well edited. Cinematography was great. The camera angles were very interesting.
And the
like it's
information was horrifying.
Yes, but visually, it was a wonderful
It was
piece.
stunning, yes.
So I'd recommend that you actually watch it.
Yes. And like as with any of the videos, they're movie reviews that we do, I think that it's just better to go in with a knowledge of what the movie is.
Yes.
But this one in particular, because there's no way we're going to be able to do the information justice. And I don't want to, because I want people to watch it.
Yeah, I 100%. Please, 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 please watch this.
Yeah, it's great.
So, let's do a brief synopsis.
Sure.
You said I'll lead because apparently I have a very angry energy to me about this documentary.
For good reason, but yeah,
Yes.
you've got a great, just rageful energy.
And as per the usual, I don't know any of the actors' names or actors
Fantastic.
or other people because I don't retain them. I don't know what it is.
I know
could
a
write
couple,
it down.
so
I
I
could
can-
write it down and I
yeah.
would still be like, oh, which person was I referring to when I wrote down this name?
I know some
So-
of the key players, so I can maybe help you out.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, the entire movie is about the great hack that occurred exposing the degree of data mining that was done by Cambridge Analytica. Now, this is probably a company you're familiar with if you, I guess, pay attention to the news, but most specifically, the US and Britain. And the reason why you'll probably be most familiar with Cambridge Analytica in either of these two countries is because the entire movie follows around Cambridge Analytica's involvement in the, the 2017?
Yeah.
2017 U.S. government election, like the presidential election.
Or no, that was 2016. Never mind.
Thank you. 2016 presidential election, and then the Brexit vote.
Yeah.
And so I would say for the first 45 minutes, I was not shocked because they were like, they used our information to create a predictive personality about who we
Right.
are as a person and predicted our purchasing habits. And I'm like,
Cool.
yeah, and things started getting a little more, in my words, overtly evil
Yeah.
after the 45-minute mark, if at least I feel. And that is when they introduce two of the key players, which was pink-haired guy, who is...
Don't know his name, but he worked for Cambridge Analytica. He was one of the dudes who set it up.
Yes, he was a data engineer.
Yes, yeah.
He was one of the people that helped in literally creating the code that was analyzing people's data. He said he gave an example and said, say for instance, you use some stupid quiz on Facebook and agree to permissions that gives us access to reading your newsfeed, reading your about page, reading your messages, and then anybody that you interact with, it gives us kind of secondhand access to their information.
Right.
And so through that process, they were able to create these digital analyses of different people and different subgroups, and kind of tailor and engineer a marketing system geared towards their interests. Now, that was horrifying enough.
Chris Wiley.
And
Jesus.
Chris Wiley. Thank you. So that's Chris Wiley. I'm going to be honest with you, pink-haired dude. So every
Yeah.
time I say pink-haired dude, it's Chris Wiley, who is a software engineer at Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
And so the next person that they introduce is the girl,
Oh, Brittany Kaiser.
Brittany Kaiser, who I guess my understanding, she was kind of one of the faces of Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah.
Like she was meeting with politicians, senators, marketing groups, campaign managers. Like she was the person that was involving people, consulting with people, and managing the applications of this software. And to kind of give a synopsis that is covered, I think, through different parts of the film, essentially she started her career as an intern in actual government Like, she was helping in the lobbying for human rights campaigns. She traveled abroad and she helped with communications. And in her words, she started getting bored because she felt that her efforts were fruitless, which I don't feel any empathy for her because that's literally the entire world. We just live in
Welcome to life, Brittany.
Yeah, this is a Kafkaesque simulation of productivity that makes us run in the hamster wheel until we die. So,
Unless you're working for the evil overlords that
of Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah.
And so this is actually kind of bizarre, and I think this is what Brooke touched on about Brittany being a very complicated character.
Yes.
Because she says initially, and we'll psychoanalyze this, she says initially she began getting into Cambridge Analytica, and as she got more and more involved in Cambridge Analytica, she began getting more and more conservative in her values, which I'm going to say is a result of the allure of progress in that, one, if Steve Bannon? Steve Bannon, right?
Bannon.
Steve Bannon was a primary funder of Cambridge Analytica.
He was a co-founder. It was crazy.
Yes.
Like, he I think he's still, or I guess the company doesn't exist, but up to the point where this all went down, he was like the primary shareholder of Cambridge Analytica, which says a lot.
Yes, and so as a result of so much funding and involvement being with the Republican Party, she began getting more and more interaction with, Republican candidates and Republican representatives. And
she was flying in the inner circles of some of the most powerful conservative people in our country. So as a result, she started doing things that she, in her own words, says that like the younger version of herself would have never even considered doing. She said she got more like, what did she say, snobby, I think? Not snobby, but like she got more bougie in the way she spoke and the way she dressed, and she started buying more expensive things, and she was like worried about brand labels all of a sudden, and like these were things that she had never done before, all because she was now keeping company with these people who highly valued luxury. And, she actually goes into hiding at one point in the documentary, and she's like somewhere in Thailand on this gorgeous resort, and like she's giving her interview in an infinity pool, and I'm like, am I supposed to feel bad for you?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and if my understanding, and she discusses it later, is the reason that she got involved in Cambridge Analytica at all is the face of Cambridge Analytica, like the actual like CEO. What's his name?
Alexander Nix.
Yes, Alexander Nix. Apparently, they encountered each other at some kind of party, and he got her drunk and said, "Tell me all of your secrets," because he valued her communication and persuasive skills, which seems like a seedy way to begin a work relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that gave me some bad feelings, but you could tell throughout that she felt bad for stabbing this dude in the back, but at the same time was like, was there ever a friendship there? Obviously not.
Did he value my ability to be persuasive no matter the cause that I was arguing with?
That is absolutely what was going on. This guy has absolutely no moral fiber whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we can get into Alexander here, but
so that's Brittany, and we'll kind of unpack that a bit, because I think in the beginning of the documentary I felt the way that the directors wanted me to feel, which was, I don't feel bad for you at all.
Yeah, I hated her at the beginning, but by the end I had sort of changed my tune.
Yeah, and this is generally a feeling we have on the podcast. Alexander Nix is he was the most fascinating one, at least for me, in the documentary. Because I actually, how do I phrase this? I don't think that he is a sociopath, which I usually like to throw around. I think in the way in which I saw him behave, he was a businessman who was closely enmeshed in making the company succeed, and he was clearly proud of the exploitation and manipulation of the people that were affected by the Cambridge Analytica data breach. And at least in all of his interviews, I think he was honest, because he would share things that directly made him look bad. But, like...
I think his job is to take the bullet where he can.
Well,
Like-
yeah, so that's we'll also unpack that because
Yeah.
this whole documentary is abhorrently clear that his entire existence was to take the bullet if anything fell apart.
Right. And he did.
Yeah, and he did. And, we'll talk about responsibility in here because that's what blew my fucking mind. But, like, I
Yeah.
think he was fairly honest about things that did occur. And so when you had Britney or you had Pink Hair Guy make these statements as if they were in no way involved in it, like... Pink-haired guy is like, yeah, they started using the data, and it cuts to Alexander Nix and said, I don't know what he's talking about. He himself, like, applied for the Trump campaign to be, like, in charge of data analysis and,
Right.
like,
Yeah, he pitched
polling
the
analysis.
campaign. Yeah.
And didn't get it, and then started attacking the company. And then Brittany was like, oh, yeah, I just feel like, it's... she made this statement that literally I wanted to fucking blow my brains out. Like, I was so fucking mad. She said, well, at the end of the day, those people still made their choice. Like,
God,
we
yeah.
presented them with information, but they still made the choice, which is... we'll unpack that later. And
her, I don't know who, like, it's her advisor, I guess, for her testimony. But he was like, did they, Brittany? And she just, like, stares at him.
Yeah, she literally stares into the distance and is like, ah. Well, like, you can see the cognitive dissonance because
Right.
it's hard to come to terms with the fact that you were directly culpable in influencing people's behavior and manipulating their minds. So she very wants to
Right.
believe that, like, she didn't do anything.
And when we finish, like, the summary, I do want to, like, dive into her whole thing because even by the end, like, you can tell she's doing it because she knows she was wrong, or, like, the company was wrong, and she's a whistleblower because she wants to stop the madness. But
Yeah.
she continues to say things like, I think I just wanted to believe that Cambridge Analytica was just the best, and I was so naive, and, like, and none of that is true. Like, and she listens to an interview which was recorded, I think, without their knowledge, and
Yeah,
then
it was
published.
Yeah.
Right, and so Alexander Nix in the interview is talking about how, they have all these campaigns that they're running and that they won, and so, like, they talk a little bit about the Brexit campaign, and he's, like, listing off all of the different examples of success that they've had with this kind of psychological data, and, like, she just, like, supplies the rest of the list, and in the interview, she sounds like she's bragging, but when she, like, looks at that interview and then talks about it, she goes, oh, yeah, I'm just, like, that girl off to the side, nervously laughing along. And I'm like,
no, you
no,
weren't."
you weren't. You were actively participating because you were proud. Like, so, it's a weird thing because she wants to do the right thing without, like, associating herself as the bad person,
Which is why it's so bizarre, because it's like both her and Pink-haired guy
Yeah.
both frame it in
Chris
this
Wiley.
way of it's Pink-haired guy are both framing it in this way of like, man, Cambridge Analytica did this.
Yeah.
Versus every time you would like interview Nix, I don't believe he ever said Cambridge Analytica. I think he said we, which is like
Yeah, well,
So
and he
bizarre.
tried to blame Facebook for a lot of it.
oh, 100%. Like everybody's always trying to blame someone else in
Right.
this. Like, which Zuckerberg, motherfucking Zuckerberg is my
Zuckerberg.
Bezos.
Oh, good.
Yes, but like it's just so bizarre because Nix is like he
Yes.
blames Facebook, but whenever refers to Cambridge Analytica, always refers to it in a way
As
that
we.
would syntactically suggest that he was involved.
Right, because I don't think you can deny that he was. I think Nix's
Right?
big thing was that he just lied about events. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't lie about, like, the involvement that he had in the company, but he absolutely just bold-faced lied about what happened at Cambridge Analytica, maintains that they never did work on Brexit, and that is just a lie. Like, there's so much evidence to the contrary, and he's
Yeah.
like, no, we never did that. And it's like, what? How
Yeah,
can you
which
just
is-
say that?
So bizarre because
Yeah.
so those are the main characters, I'd
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
There's also a journalist. Do you have her name?
Her name is. Oh, it starts with a C. Hang on. It's on the tip of my tongue. Keep going, and I will definitely think of it.
Okay, she's a reporter, a journalist who actually,
She's
I
for
believe,
The Guardian.
yes, she won a
Yeah.
Pulitzer Prize for this.
She was a finalist, I believe.
Okay, she was a finalist, and she was the one that was covering most of it, and she said it was so bizarre because every time we made the allegation that they were involved in Brexit, they'd say openly that they were never involved whatsoever, and then she found this video where, like, the Brexit party was headed with Brittany. She was at the panel. Brittany was at the fucking panel when they were answering questions on Brexit, explaining how Cambridge Analytica was involved, and then Nix himself in previous interviews said he was involved in the Brexit party, and then later was like, no.
No, we weren't. Carol Cadwalder.
Thank you.
My God, Cadwalder.
You're doing your best. It's
It's
okay.
like tough. Cadwalladr. Okay.
Okay. And so those are, I think, the main cast of characters of people we should be concerned
Yes.
with.
Well, and then
we
there's
know
the guy that it actually starts with this man's story. He this whole thing started where one man wanted to know what the Cambridge Analytica had collected on him, and he requested of them, hey, I'm not asking you to stop. I just want my data. I want to see what you have. And they refused. And
Yeah.
so thus began this whole debate of, are data rights human rights? I would tend to argue yes.
Also, Brittany herself made the claim that this data and information available is tantamount to psychological warfare, and that it in itself should only be regulated by the government, which I would like to argue should not be available at all, but said that this is a means of psychologically controlling governments and elections. And then, Cadwalder? Cadwalder also asked the question, will we ever have a fair election again? And I would tend towards the negatory.
Yeah.
As long as this information is available. And so let's explain the impact and what they have collected now that we've introduced the cast of characters.
Yes.
So I'm going to do it more chronologically, and the documentary does it in a more unveiling style. So again, if you don't want this to be spoiled, I implore you to watch this before you listen to this podcast.
Pause it right now. Go watch the documentary. It's like an hour and 20 minutes.
Actually, it's almost 2 hours.
Is it really?
It's 1 hour and 58 minutes.
It didn't feel that long at all.
Towards the end, it felt that long because I was so sad. I was like, oh man, there's
And then
more.
it got worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So please watch the documentary before you listen to this. But here we go. So essentially, Cambridge Analytica found a means of taking people's data and systematically organizing it in a way that created profiles for people, and then by proxy created profiles on subgroups of people. And they began experimenting with applications of these data in third world countries. They explicitly stated that they began in third world countries to understand the voting dynamics of subpopulations of people, to, quote, either encourage voting or discourage voting. Now, by that I mean there was an election in India, and I have a few
Trinidad
friends.
and Tobago.
Yes, Trinidad and Tobago, and also they talk about the election in India later. There's a couple of elections that occurred in, I'm going to say, Southeast Asia, like you said, Trinidad and Tobago, South America. And they did analyses, and they found, at least in India, they found that as easily influenceable the Indian youth are, they said outright that their data found that if their parents told them to vote, that they would vote, because they would are less likely to disobey their parents than they are to follow anything that Cambridge Analytica has paneled to them. And so they found, however, that I believe they said specifically African people.
Yes.
Was it? Yes. African people are far more susceptible to social media influence, and they themselves petitioned and headed a campaign that encouraged the African community to not vote during an influential election as a, quote, sign of protest. Now,
Yeah.
I want you to, like, think about that.
Yeah, like if we break it down, it's it is a company that is self-professedly right-wing, supporting authoritarianism,
Yes.
fabricating a movement to protest authoritarianism in order to secure an authoritarian government.
Yeah. They literally created, headed, designed, and I'll go more into detail when we get to the American and UK
Yeah.
application, because they give far more explanation of how they did that.
Yes.
And then I believe it was Chris Wilder or it was Brittany. I can't remember.
Chris Wiley?
Explained. Sure. Pink-haired guy. I'm doing my fucking best. They said outright that they were trying to find subgroups of people whose minds were easier to influence.
Yeah, they called them persuadables, which is
Yes.
dystopian.
Yes. And like that's why they said they didn't target the Indian youth, because they said they're going to listen to their parents. It's not worth their time to invest the time and energy into like persuading these groups of people. So they tested it out in different elections in the third world, refined their strategy, and then applied it to the 2016 presidential election in the US and Brexit. Now, how did they do that in the US? This literally made my skin crawl when they
Blew my
explained
mind.
what they did.
Blew my mind.
So here is an example of what they did. They would create anonymously these pro-black rights groups on Facebook and pages, and they would post clearly propaganda style like memes and posts about black rights that were just so gratuitous in the polarization. But it was stuff like there was a picture that this one I remember. It was a police officer split in the middle, and the left half was a KKK outfit and the right half was a police officer, and it said they're all the same, which is like
we don't really need to break down whether or not like police brutality exists or whether or not like black people are like, we know black people are targeted in our justice system, but like the entire goal of that image was to incite fear and hatred. Like there was nothing genuine about the critique.
No. And they went on to make similar memes like this. They would edit videos of police brutality and post like clips on these pages, which there were a multitude of pages. I don't want to say it was just one.
Right.
They gave one instance, and they gave one instance of applying it to the Black Lives Matter movement. But I am nearly certain, because they gave other examples of how they applied this to the right wing, that this is kind of the same methodology that they used. They went as far as planning and organizing protests through these pages that Cambridge Analytica themselves created, inviting members of other valid Black Lives Matter and Black rights movement to these protests that they created to create social unrest, film and take pictures, and then post it, validating that this is an active, like
a threat
uprising.
to our country. Yeah.
Right? Then they would use that as a mechanism in the Black Lives Matter pages that they were making, saying like, look, we have to fight. Look at these instances of police brutality, further inciting violence and rage. And then they would also use these same images and videos in pages that they made that were right-leaning, that were abhorrently racist, and also skewed the truth to show how violent this subpopulation of people were, that already there was a small group of, like I'd say the alt-right, that already believed this. It was just synthesized confirmation
Right.
that it was true.
They
So that
fabricated
was
all of it. It was
Yeah.
insane, and it worked.
Like, and that's I cannot emphasize enough. They outright said that they synthesized propaganda to make different populations of people become more polarized in their own beliefs.
Woo!
Just one, and they discussed this. It was like towards the end of the movie. They said the Trump campaign ran 5.6 million videos on Facebook, where the Hillary Clinton campaign ran 33,000.
Yeah.
So
the
like
difference is insane.
So that was an application what they were doing. And for the rest of like 20 minutes, they explained how they were data mining and using this information to specifically target videos, pages, and ads and news that would validate people's own beliefs and opinions and also create new opinions that would assist their cause. And so my understanding is that in order to get President Trump to win, they would target ads and media towards already fairly right-leaning people to convince them that they need to push harder and also create divisiveness in the left that would cause Hillary or Bernie, depending on who it turned out to be, to lose.
Right. So it was then there were two sort of aspects to that. One was in the left there was already dissension because like people didn't like Hillary Clinton in the left and didn't want to vote for her, and they're like, fine, I'm going to write in Bernie's name. And so they fed on that. And then the other thing was that they focused on profiles, specifically the persuadables that we mentioned earlier, in swing states, so like Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, and those people in those states that they felt they could persuade, those are the people they would target the hardest. So they would slam them with just page after page of propaganda, videos that had been altered, literally news articles that were just false. Like, we had the huge, like, fake news issue on Facebook, and that was something that was addressed in the documentary. But as much as they could, push them as hard as they could to get these people who were kind of on the fence to swing over to the right.
One way. Yeah. Polarize one way or the other. Like,
and, like, it worked, because Trump only needed, like, a couple, 60, 70,000 votes to win. And he got them. And what's just shocking is they said outright, they're like, oh yeah, in states like that were already pretty, validated and whatever they were going to lean, we just didn't spend money advertising to people in those states. We targeted the people in swing states. Right. Like in California, for instance, California is blue every year. So, or every election. Yeah. So they didn't waste their money trying to get California to turn red. Like, that's a waste of time. Instead, they targeted states that are different, that are swing states. And it worked. And not even to mention, like, I actually recall there were doctored videos that came out during the election with no idea as to the source, but it was like, do you remember? It was something along the lines of, I believe it was like Trump, or it was a right-leaning like senator or something, where they made the argument that he had like assaulted someone or groped someone or something like that. And I'm not going to name the specifics because I don't even remember the details fully. Right. And they found out later that the video was doctored and edited actually to show him being more aggressive than he actually was, which on the left they used as validation that this man was bad. And then on the right, you could see that it was doctored, and they used it as ammunition that the left is actively trying to sway them and beat like Trump. Yeah. So it was like and I don't on both sides. And I don't know if that was Cambridge Analytica, and I'm not going to make the allegation that it was, but that is like the kind of thing. It was kind of behavior that was becoming more and more normalized during this election. Right. Now, that was what they did in the US. And then they talk about in Brexit, they did similar things, spreading disinformation, targeting impressionables, convincing people that this is a good thing to do, working directly with campaigns that were aligned towards Brexit, making the claims that they were not. Like the same thing. I gave the case study with the US because it was no different. Now, they go
into a bit of detail about how Facebook ordered them to delete the data as of 2015, I believe.
Yeah.
Because Britney received an email and saved the email where they had sent out data collected from a myriad of sources, inclusive of Facebook, and the latest updated data version was like 2016, which means that past the time that they had promised to delete the data, they still had and were actively using the data.
Yes, ma'am.
She also had resynced her Apple information, which is actually kind of astounding. The same thing that they were weaponizing was their own demise, because she had found all of her old appointments with specific senators, specific campaigns, specific parties, down to the date and time that she met with them.
Right. So she had like a timeline of the entire thing. It was crazy.
Yeah. Like, it was like, met with Trump campaign, met with this senator, met with this conservative, met with this party, met with this person. Like, down to the day and the hour, and she forwarded it all when she was being interviewed for the Brexit investigation, which is insane to me because the UK read an investigation about this entire phenomena to better understand how this information was being weaponized and the impact that it would have on democracy. And they talk briefly about the trials that we had in the US, where they mediocrely interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, which
God,
also
it was so embarrassing.
And oh my God, this also was so unbelievably obnoxious because the people who were interrogating him did not understand how the internet worked.
Yeah, and they didn't really touch on that in the documentary, but I encourage you to look up some of the highlights from those interviews because, oh man, it's pretty sad. These are
wish
the people
they
making our laws.
I wish they had assigned people who better understood technology to interview him, because he was being softballed these questions that they thought were difficult, that he was able to just say, like, they were like, if I go somewhere and use Google Maps, will they know? And he's like,
who?
I don't know. Like, he runs Facebook, not Google.
Right, yeah.
Ugh.
And like,
so
there was one question that I remember. This is my favorite, and this is sort of off topic, but this is my favorite moment in this entire garbage interview. Someone, and I don't remember the senator, asks him, so when I type in Google, who gets that search? And he's like, I'm sorry? And the senator's like, well, you know, like I type something in Google and they have to return items to me. So, you know, who's reading my searches? And he goes, it's an algorithm. No one is sitting behind a computer and manually typing out items to return to your computer when you search in Google. That's not how it works.
Also, this is the man in charge of Facebook, not
right,
Google.
It's not Google.
So again, like, it was a joke. The entire investigation was a joke, and Cambridge Analytica, when they were being interviewed at those trials, denied being involved in anything whatsoever, despite the fact that their fucking name and logo was at the end of Trump campaign videos. But whatever. It was a joke. It was embarrassing, and it was a joke. And if I will say, as a testament to how well that this was covered up, I remember vaguely that Cambridge Analytica was a thing.
See,
when
I
it
didn't.
Happened. No?
I had no memory of that name when we started the documentary. I
really
just didn't remember them.
I again, I didn't remember specifics. Only because I watched Philip DeFranco is like the only means of me catching up with what's happening in the world. And I remember he touched on maybe for a few episodes that Cambridge Analytica was being alleged to tampering with the election and working with people to sway like views, but like it was very like there wasn't a ton of information available at the time. So, like, I actually believed in my brain that it was less of a big deal than it was, because I was like, yeah, of course they have my Facebook information. Like, they're tailoring shit to my timeline.
Right.
But exactly. I had no idea the degree in
No.
which this was affecting
No.
dissemination of information.
Yeah, I think the media didn't really get it either. Because, like, what I
Yeah.
read of it was just like, did you know that Facebook is tailoring your ads? And I was like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew that.
And-
You didn't? Come on.
Yeah, like there was like in the beginning where you have the marketing professor, the one who asked for his data and was
Yes.
refused it. He asked them. He said, this is like something that they do. They tailor your ads to you, and one of the girls in his lecture said, honestly, I've been on the internet my entire life. Personally, tailored ads don't really bother me. They're just like whatever. So when does that become a big deal? And that was the opening for the entire documentary.
Right.
Because it goes beyond, hey, we know that you like Canon cameras. Do you know that there's a sale on lenses right now? It's like, okay, Brooke seems very open. They literally had openness scores on a
God,
scale
yeah.
of 1 to 10
Jesus.
and would tailor the degree of advertising of certain things to you so that they were like, okay, well, let's just say, for example, Brooke has an openness score of 7.8 and Olivia has an openness score of 2.8. So let's just give stuff to confirm her opinion and stuff to Brooke that is of a myriad of options, and then see how the score changes over time and then
Right.
tailor accordingly.
You know what's crazy is they brought up, like, one of the first things they did to gather this data from people is they would give you a personality test through Facebook. And, like, it was just one of those things that you would opt into. And, you were giving your own data over willingly without realizing what you were doing, obviously, because no one reads the fine print. But, like, yeah. You just were handing over your digital profile with a personality test that they were allowed to keep. It's insane.
And so now to transition to the culpability, which is probably the part that keeps me up at night.
Yes.
And I've discussed many and many times about how I believe in the modern day, things are systematically designed where there's so many layers of bureaucracy that is truly impossible to ever point a finger at who is responsible. And in my opinion, everybody involved in this documentary is responsible, period. Right?
Well, yeah,
like,
of course. I mean,
and
like, not the guy, the professor man, but
no.
yeah.
Yeah, because even you can say, like, well, you gave your information to Facebook. It's like, okay, I thought that I was doing a personality test on what kind of bread I am. Like, why would I know that would
Well,
result...
and even then, like, you come to find out that when you click through a personality test on Facebook, it says, allow this app to access your profile. What that generally means to a layperson, i.e. myself, is I will let them see my profile, right?
Yeah.
So what they actually did is they mined your profile, and then they were allowed suddenly to mine any of your friends without them knowing. No consent given. They could just go into your friend list and mine whatever they wanted from them too. And that's just evil.
Yeah.
Like there's no other word for that.
Yeah, it's evil. It's
evil.
objectively evil. And so that's what we kind of discussed, is that pink-haired guy and Brittany,
Chris Wiley.
thank you, they both blamed Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah.
And Nix blamed Facebook, and Facebook blamed Cambridge Analytica, and the politicians blamed Cambridge Analytica, and governments blamed people,
Sure.
but nobody was found to be at fault. And even in the UK investigation, when they received their final verdict, nobody was arrested, to my knowledge. Nobody was prosecuted, to my knowledge.
Well, the company was liquidated, so that was
but
part
is
of it.
that really a punishment?
No. What I'm saying is that they liquidated the company. They claimed otherwise, but the company was absolutely liquidated to avoid legal punishment.
Yes. And in that interview we discussed earlier, where essentially Channel 4 News had made an appointment with Nix, and I believe it was Brittany, or was it some other dude? I believe it was some other dude during this like lunch meeting that they had.
Yes.
And they said outright that we've participated in X elections with X political parties and X campaigns and had this effect on elections, and we're involved in Brexit. So this is our background. This is our portfolio.
Right. This is
what
our
are you
proof
looking
that it
for?
works. Yes.
Right. And I remember Nick said when they aired that, that footage, Cambridge Analytica was just silent, and they went back to work without saying anything, kind of knowing it was the beginning of the end. So liquidating the company, to me, doesn't seem like a punishment.
No,
all it was to get rid of the evidence. Alexander Nix, I believe, was being pulled on on criminal charges.
Yes.
Which, to my understanding,
I don't think he was ever convicted of anything.
No, and he couldn't be because he was allowed a smidge of protection by saying, well, yes, we got the data, but Facebook gave us the data, and Facebook could make the argument that they had no idea this is the way the data was being used, despite amounts of evidence that showed that they were very aware that this was how the data was being used, because they liked having this data because it helped tailor their ads, increasing their ad revenue.
I just found out something horrifying.
Yep.
Alexander Nix was appointed the director of a company called Emmer Data in 2018.
So, going back to this, nobody was prosecuted.
Woo!
Nobody's responsible. Even the politicians that relied on this data to sway votes are not being held responsible. Steve Bannon, who is documented saying that in order to change the world, you have to understand it and break it and reform it with your own vision, which sounds authoritarian.
What? No.
Now has brought into question the validity of literally everything and anything that you see online, whether it's through political pages that you trust. Like, if you thought that the Facebook page with 1,000 likes that posts videos on police brutality is reliable because it's not quote unquote big media, it literally could be run and managed itself by Cambridge Analytica, or obviously something else.
And it's untraceable because there's no tag on it.
They said specifically that they designed videos and memes and propaganda that was unbranded because they intentionally never wanted it to be traced back to them, but wanted to spread the information. Alexander Nix himself said that in his interview.
Which is definitely not shady.
No.
Also, I do want to say that Nix was actually fired on April of the same year, so it's fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, and
I wonder if he has a LinkedIn.
Don't look at him on LinkedIn. I'm sure if you look at him on LinkedIn, it notifies him that you've looked at him on LinkedIn.
Stop.
You know that LinkedIn does that, right? Every time you look at a profile, it sends that person that you specifically looked at their profile.
Really?
Yes, every time.
Oh, good thing I don't use LinkedIn.
Yeah. Because I remember my ex-boyfriend looked at my father's profile, and my father's like, why the fuck is this man looking at my LinkedIn profile?
Oh, that's creepy. Why'd he do that?
Yeah, also looked at my profile because it notified me. Blocked him.
Ugh.
So now what? Now that we've summarized the information that was presented us in this documentary, which again, I reiterate, you should see yourself because I believe that even as much as we've said, it is way worse in documentary form.
It's so much worse.
What do we do with this information? What keeps you up at night?
We do absolutely nothing with it, Olivia, because there's nothing we can do about it.
Right, because it's impossible at this point for you to live off the grid.
Yep.
They already have information on you. They are able to track
5,000 data points for every American in the U.S.
They already have access to your purchasing information, right? So even if you deleted every social media and wiped your data clean, you're buying things with a card because who the fuck has cash on them? And also, just like behavior and like it's impossible. You cannot live off the grid. They will have your information, period. Right?
Right. And you have no rights to your data, obviously. Because I think they ruled in the case of that professor that they had broken laws by denying him that information, but he says himself he's never going to get it, right? Like, because the company is gone, first of all. But yeah, that there are no laws in place that protect your human right to your own data. So
it exists and you can't wipe it clean.
Tough shit.
And then like, where do we go from there? Like, as it was, I was pretty dubious of literally anything that was presented to me ever, because I was aware to a capacity that I can't trust what's online.
Right.
But how many adults do you know that start conversations with, I was reading an article online? And like, it really, whatever you're presented with becomes a facet of your reality, because even knowing this, even knowing, oh, they tailor my newsfeed to me, the people knew that. They said they will find what you like and then double down on it and not share you opposing opinions.
So the entire
knew
internet
that.
becomes an echo chamber at that point.
And they, even knowing that, people were like, wow, but not my newsfeed. And you're like...
Right. Yeah, it's this weird attitude that, like, somehow they're immune.
Yeah.
You are not immune to propaganda.
If you have the fucking audacity to say that you go out of your way to seek opposing arguments, fuck you. Like, like nobody's safe. Because you know the people that are like, I go out of my way to seek opposing arguments.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, here's an opposing argument. They're like, I'm sorry?
Excuse me?
Right?
Yeah,
and you're like...
and even if you do that, like, I'm sure there's somebody listening right now that's like, hey, I go on Breitbart. And it's like, great, good.
Congratulations.
Awesome. But, like, I think at this point, it isn't a matter of you having the choice to, like, seek out other information. You are being bombarded with subliminal messaging every time you log in now. Like, it's not a matter of choice. Like, you can do what you can, right? Like, I can read various news sources and try to parse for myself what actually happened on this day or whatever, and try and, like, make myself aware of propaganda techniques and buzzwords and, you know, the kinds of logical fallacies that you see on the internet. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get bombarded with propaganda every single day. And, like, at some point you have to, like, you gotta just take your pride a notch down and say, yeah, I'm probably being affected by this, at least on some level.
Like, how many times have, like, you shared, like, information with someone and then they're like, what are you talking about? No. And then you look it up and you realize that the articles that you read were probably pretty targeted and omitted a lot of information.
Right.
And you're like,
Shit.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and then you're like, damn.
But then you've got, you know, like, news sources that are, and Facebook is so bad about this even now, after all this, news articles, quote unquote, that are false. They are just false. Like, people are just printing lies because you can, and there's no regulation of it because it's the internet. And as long as you read it on the internet, I guess people believe that it's true. I had a family member who will go nameless claim to me.
You know who you are.
and I'm pretty sure, Olivia, you also know who they are. But she claimed to me that President Obama was a Muslim because he had taken off his wedding ring during Ramadan, which is just not true. Like, he was pretty openly Presbyterian while he was in office, but that aside, that article was fake news. It just was. And it took one Snopes search to figure out that that was false. But, like, even the Snopes article wasn't enough, right?
And also, my favorite thing in the whole world is when you tell someone, like, they make this allegation, and you're like, hey, I did a quick search and found a Snopes article that debunked it, just, like, letting you know. And then I've been blocked before by like telling someone, hey, this isn't true. Or I have a family member who shall go nameless, who is one of my least favorite people to see interact online. And I've gone as far as to like unfollow her on stuff.
Right.
And like I try not to engage myself. But she does this really toxic thing that really fucking blows my mind where she'll post information from pages that aren't even like MSNBC. Like the domain names are like, I don't know, something stupid like not democracy, just like Republicans are dumb, something like in the name that is like clearly propaganda,
right?
And then post it with a comment of a long explanation why anyone that disagrees with her is a fucking idiot, and then someone comments and says, hey, I kind of disagree with you here, and she immediately switches sides to the reasonable academic that's like, well, I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's important to consider how these people feel. And I'm like, hey,
you can't do both.
Like, you can't switch. And then also the same woman that posted a post about how she personally goes out of her way to seek differing opinions and thinks that conversations are an opportunity to learn from each other. Jesus. And so other people need to be more open to listening to differing sides. And she is the least, like, understanding person I've ever met.
Right.
Like, so fuck you. But, like, that's, like, she's not alone. There's so many people that are like, oh, I personally take liberties to listen to other people's opinions. But then the moment you disagree with them, it turns into a yelling argument, like every family gathering I've ever been to with her there. And, like, it's just, like, mean. Like, just objectively mean. And, like, you know, I've gone to lengths for other family members to, like, talk to them and listen to them and convey to them, maybe to a capacity, you need to be compassionate towards people that think things that you objectively think are awful because you have no idea how they got to that opinion. Right. And you're probably going to make a bigger dent if you listen to them and understand why they believe what they do. And then I go to family gatherings and those same people who are like, literally, there was an argument about like Trump supporters, like rural Trump supporters. And like my father made the statement, like, you know, you don't know why those people voted for Trump. Like, maybe they believe truly that this is an improvement to the situation.
They do.
Which, yay, Dad. And then is immediately met with literally just them saying they're stupid. And I'm like, that doesn't help.
Right.
You're not helping.
Like whether or not they are intelligent is not the issue. Like,
yeah, and then like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna meet a Trump supporter and be like, you're stupid.
Right.
Like, they're gonna be like, she made a really good point. like what's your end goal?
I am stupid. Shit.
I'm a fucking idiot, bigoted racist, and oh my god. I'm so sorry. Like,
what
that's
was
not
I thinking. I'm gonna go sign up to be a Democrat right now. Like no, come on.
But like, that's also,
that's not what it's about. Like, it's not about convincing people that they're wrong and like for the sake of making better changes. Like, the point is to feel superior because you have the better opinions and you are the wokest bae out there. And like
that's why this documentary so infuriated me is because it's very apparent that they went out of their way to polarize people and create dissension. And so, like, essentially, if you were given a group of people that were very broad on the spectrum of like political like discourse, and there was somebody from every walk of life, the group conversation in that environment would probably favor centricism of like, I understand where you're coming from, but I think this. But if you put in a room 6 people from the alt left and 6 people from the alt right and say, just come to an agreement. Like, that's not going to fucking happen.
No.
Especially when people from either side, because I have family members on both ends of the spectrum, like, either side go into an argument with somebody that has a different opinion of them, like, than them, that they're stupid, and any time that they disagree with them, is just confirmation that they're stupid. Like my very right-leaning family, anytime anybody makes a slightly liberal argument, explain to them that liberals are deluded and just want everything in the world and are unwilling to make sacrifices, and you having the audacity to want health care is just representative that you want to give health care to Mexicans. And you're like, don't know how that got involved,
What's
but
the
sure.
problem with that? But also not what I was saying. Thanks.
And then, like, the same thing with, like, the alt-left. Like, well, I tweeted it today that was like, I like watermelon, and someone comments on Twitter, so you hate oranges? Like,
yeah, there is definitely that performative allyship going on. But, like, so here's the thing about centrism. Centricism? Whatever. So, it is impossible to say that both sides, like, are as bad as, like, they are not equal. One side is annoying at best, right now.
yeah.
The other side wants genocide. So, like,
yes.
I think it's really important to sort of clarify that in no way do I at least believe that, like, getting a bunch of people in a room and being like, can't we all just get along? Because the answer is no.
It's not,
we can't.
Yeah.
Like,
at this point, we cannot undo what has been done.
Right. Like, we are
easily.
at a point where, like, the Republican mindset is a bunch of rich dudes who are making all of the rules and then trying to convince the middle class, if you just help us, it'll help you later because it'll make you rich.
Which is also, if you make the argument to the contrary, it literally in the documentary, it shows that the people who were funding, like, Cambridge Analytica were the upper echelon of white society funneling money into this machine to find people that were somewhere in the middle and swing them right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's literally what happened. And, like, of course, like, there are instances where the left can be bad, and of course there are instances where the right can be bad. I mean, we've talked about, like, instances in communist states, which is, like, alt-left. Like, whoever is in power, when polarized, period, is going to abuse the power.
Right.
And, like, at this point, currently, as it stands, the rampant polarization has made the opposite side focus on the worst of the worst of the worst, doubling down and just polarizing more. Like, if you're telling me TERFs are representative of the entire left, that's not the case.
Nope.
And if you're saying that, like, the people that were funding Cambridge Analytica are the entirety of the right, it's also not true. But as it stands, the upper echelon of white society is currently in control of our government and funding and utilizing our data to make you believe that everyone is bad. And
yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, the people who we should be afraid of are using their power to make us afraid of the wrong people.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's so much misinformation about, like, immigrants, period, which now leads me to believe that it is the result of this. Like, I'm sure you have the same. Like, I have a pretty small pocket of right-leaning family.
Yeah.
You have I
have a somewhat larger pocket of right-leaning family.
I have, like, the pizza pockets, and you have the whole hot pocket.
The whole damn thing.
And, like the Obama thing, blatantly racist.
Yep, super
but
racist
sure.
and also just not true. But, yeah.
And it's, it's the same thing when you talk to someone where they're like, immigrants are stealing our jobs. And you're like, here's data that says otherwise. And they're like, yeah. And you're like,
here's data that says otherwise. Me.
And you're like, I don't know, like, I can't.
You can't have an argument. It's not an argument. Because it's not about that. It's about being right.
It's about being right, and you can't, just candidly, you cannot argue with someone if you go into the argument assuming that they are not a person. Because you can say that they're not that you're not doing that, or you're just trying to quote unquote have a discussion, which fuck you. But like, if you go into it, if you're like right leaning and you go into the conversation thinking this is a dumb liberal that is being brainwashed by the media, or you go into the conversation, this is a dumb middle class person being impressioned by the right, like, you're not going, no, there's no argument, there's no winning.
Even if you're correct.
Even like
there's no, that's
like, that's
not
what
a fruitful argument then. Like, it's just you yelling at somebody because you want to be heard.
And discourse is entirely defined by other people's dehumanization of anybody that disagrees with them.
It's
and
awful.
It's reductive and it's harmful, and it's just reinforcing this government system that frankly was funded, designed, and created by people that could not care less about your existence
Right.
as long as they get to eat shrimp on their yacht.
Eat the rich.
Yes. Eat the rich. Eat the rich. So that's something that makes me scared for this future election.
Yeah, because the guy who was in charge of the social media marketing of the Trump 2016 campaign is now the campaign manager of the 2020 campaign. So it's gonna be fine, I'm sure.
And it sounds like that the right that already still believes that everything they believe that is right is going to still believe that they're right. And then now anybody who is aware that there is a data breach and they're being manipulated is going to stop believing everything they read to a capacity where they stop listening.
Yeah.
And
so
then
just every belief that they hold already is solid now.
Yes. And like the fact that they were able to convey to youth that a means of resisting authoritarianism is to not vote.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something straight up out of the authoritarian regime in your history textbook.
We are watching a fall into fascism, and the more I read about it, the more I just I don't. It's fascism in a way that we never knew was possible because it's all brand new, right?
It's all brand new, and also how do you control it?
You can't. And like the most we can do is, shed light on it the way that this documentary did and the way that, the whistleblowers did, which...
And you know what blows my fucking mind?
What's that?
Is like what Julian Assange and then the guy who's currently hiding in Russia.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Shoot.
You know who I'm talking about.
I do, but yeah, here.
Oh, yeah, I don't know his
I'll
name.
look it up. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, as I continue. We're both whistleblowers that voiced concern for data mining decades ago, and in response to releasing information showing that governments were using our data against us, were prosecuted and Edward Snowden, thank you, and are in hiding.
Yeah.
Because they were whistleblowers. Like Brittany, whatever her last name is, Brittany... Kaiser, her mother feared for her life when she went on testimony in the UK because everybody who's mad at her is not somebody you would want to be mad at you.
Right.
So that just plays into the system of how difficult it must be to be a whistleblower when Brittany herself is painfully aware that a large majority of the people in the Republican Party probably want her dead.
Right. So this is where I come down on Brittany Kaiser, because we kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
And you were so funny as you were watching it. I was getting texts from Olivia the entire time, just raging about Brittany Kaiser. And I, who had already finished the documentary, was a little bit softer on her.
Yes.
And this is kind of why. So the beginning of the documentary sort of frames her as this person who didn't really understand the breadth of what Cambridge Analytica had done wrong, but knew that it was bad. And then on the side, still kind of believed in what she had been doing, which was bizarre. And she makes this comment, like we talked about earlier, that all we did was present information, they made the decision, right? And I think as time goes on, that it becomes more and more clear that she understands the severity of what happened and the human rights violations that happened while she was working for that company. And it goes a little bit into her backstory that she worked in humanitarianism when she was younger, and then she actually was an intern on the social media team for Barack Obama's campaign. And, she had this entire life that was sort of rooted in being a good person. But the thing that I think was sort of a revelation for me was she talks about how, she was working in humanitarianism. That doesn't pay very well. And she worked for the Barack Obama campaign. And then she was, approached by the Clinton campaign in 2016, and they wouldn't pay her. Like, they just weren't gonna pay her. And, Cambridge Analytica approached her and was like, here's a salary worth having. And at that time, she talks about how her family just didn't have any money. And, like, all of a sudden, this crisis in her life happened where her family was going to be homeless. Her father had to have brain surgery and could never work again. And she was suddenly the breadwinner of her entire family, her immediate family. And, the people that she wanted to work for would not hire her for a paycheck. And she was like, at some point, you take the job that pays. And I had to look inward and think, if I were offered that job, would I have taken it? And the answer is yes. I absolutely would have if I had been in her position. And, like, I still have this feeling of her that she was absolutely influenced by what she experienced there and, became sort of this monstrous person that just justified everything that she did.
Because the cognitive dissonance, if you're working for a company that you actively think is evil, would destroy you. But also, I myself have a family member who worked for a company that I'm not very fond of, and who doesn't really like talking about it because the argument is, I'm a breadwinner. What do you want me to do?
Right.
And it's like, everybody would like to say, like, no, they're evil. But it's like, if it was just her alone and her own income, I'm sure she would have been like,
I can make it by doing something else. But she was supporting her entire family.
Yeah. And so you're kind of like, which also, why would the fuck, I can't believe they had the audacity to say they weren't going to pay her. Fuck you.
Right? Like that's crazy.
You have enough money to pay her.
Right? The DNC. Like, let's get real. But, yeah, like, it's this crazy thing where I would love to be able to say that I would have the moral backbone to, see what was going on and just quit. But if I have people relying on me whose entire livelihoods depend on me having not just an income, but that income...
Yeah,
like,
then you're like, well...
Where do you go at that point? Like, you stop working for Cambridge Analytica, who's going to hire you?
Yeah, also now that you've worked for Cambridge Analytica, who's going to hire you?
Right. And I know now she started her own, like, foundation for the data rights movement, and that's super cool. And she, like, just does speaking engagements, and it educates people on the garbage that went on and how to sort of combat it now, which is rad. So I come down on Brittany a little less hard than I thought I would.
Towards the end, you feel a little more empathy. And also, I think we're probably more susceptible to feeling some empathy because of how often we've covered topics where people are like, how could you ever believe that?
Right.
And then you're like,
well,
how could you not?
Yeah, like, you have no idea the situation until you find out what the situation is. And I am in the luxurious position of never having to have faced a moral dilemma like that. Right? But, like, I'm about to start work full-time, and I have a job that will probably leave me in a financial situation where I'm pretty comfortable.
Yep.
And the black and white of it is that if I were to quit that job, I would be below the poverty line, right? Like, this is the reality, is we live in a world where you can't just not work. And if you quit your job... you won't be working for kind of a while. So it's all cyclical, and I'm sure that there is an element of the cyclicality that is purposeful.
I also totally forgot that you reminded me of the Republican Party is not the only one that we should lambast, because I totally forgot the WikiLeaks exposure of the DNC systematically planning for Bernie Sanders to lose during the primary in order for Hillary Clinton to be the main candidate.
Which we done knew was gonna happen. Yeah, it was bad fucking news.
So essentially the entire election was pre-planned from the get-go and had less to do with us and more to do with how affluent people wanted the world to turn out.
What else is new, Olivia?
So,
and I don't even know where to end this. Yeah.
The positive that I will take away for American listeners, and honestly anybody that's in any other country, you need to vote. Like, we need to vote. Like, I don't want you to come from this and say none of it matters and nothing we're seeing is real. At the end of the day, it's difficult to vote because you have to put in the time and energy to understand the specifics of what every candidate is arguing for.
Right.
And that's a lot of work. And I completely empathize because I'm working 60 to 70 hour work weeks right now with like everything. I get it. I understand that it's a lot of fucking work and like a lot of other shit. But if we don't make the efforts to remove these specific people from office, it's like we're on the brink of a fascist takeover that we cannot at some point get out of anymore.
Right.
So there's an election in 2020. Pay attention to the primaries. Pay attention to what they're campaigning for. Be critical of them. You don't have to 100% agree with a candidate to vote for them.
Right.
But you should agree with a large majority of what they're campaigning for. And listen
and if
to
you're not
differing
sure,
opinion.
Right.
Right.
If you're not sure on an issue, look up the issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, a lot of people are threatened by the immigration issue. I beg you to do 30 minutes of research on the reality of the immigration issue as it stands today.
Because
it's not what it seems.
And, I think for a lot of people, you and me are both in the luxury of being card-carrying citizens of the U.S.
Yes.
And also white, and also comparably pretty affluent to a lot of the people that are affected. And at the end of the day, no matter how you feel about immigration, no matter how you feel about a lot of different political leanings, like, people are being systematically, physically and psychologically abused. And I don't want to make the argument that it is entirely out of our control because we are partially culpable for letting it happen.
Right.
Which is, I think, the most unsettling thing from that documentary is, like, it's so easy to say it's somebody else's fault.
It's
when,
not
like,
me. Yeah.
I don't believe I voted in the primaries for the last election. I only voted in the final one because I was also in the position of none of it really matters, and whoever's in the end is in the end. And probably because I am one of many people that didn't vote in the primaries, I was left with two pretty garbage choices.
Right.
And I can't make the definitive argument that things would necessarily be better with either result because I just don't know.
Right.
And I don't know how much of this is even within my control.
The only way you find out is by, upping the voter turnout. So.
Yes, and God, there's the voter turnout rate in the U.S. is abysmal. So please fucking consider how much of an impact that the voter results would have been if several million people in the U.S. turned out to vote.
Yep.
We're all partially responsible, and all we can do is better.
Yeah. And educating yourself is hard, but it is absolutely our responsibility, especially if you are someone like Olivia and I who have the financial luxuries that we do, the political luxuries we have by being white in America. If this is you, if we are describing you right now, you have a particular responsibility to being educated on what is actually happening in America right now, because there are people whose voices are not heard purposefully so.
Yeah.
Not to be a bummer, but this whole thing is a bummer, so,
I'm so anxious. I just wanted to enjoy cats and a 3-foot burrito.
I'm so sorry that we collectively ruined your day.
Yeah, but, like, this is so fucking... And honestly, I'm so relieved that we saw this documentary because you didn't know about Cambridge and I didn't even think it was that big of a deal.
Right.
And it is, and they say outright that they are intentionally manipulating our opinions to align with what they want the world to look like. And at the end of the day, rich white people on a yacht should not be deciding the fate of people who are currently in camps. So...
Yeah.
Sorry.
And if that's a radical opinion, you can lock me up because woof, what a world.
Fascism in any sense, no matter the party in control, is inherently harmful, as we've discussed in China and so many areas of the world, and especially in the US and the UK. Please be mindful. Please be aware. Please research.
And please drink a lot of water.
Please drink a lot of water. This is our fucking chance. Use this as a means of taking it back and doing everything you can. And
or hear me out. Revolution.
Revolution.
Perfect.
Okay, so oh god, I have nothing positive to end on other than we are on social media.
Oh god, this is so hollow.
We just talked about how garbage social media is, but you know what isn't garbage? The memes that we post on social media, the interaction we have with fans.
It's very cool.
We're at TTK Me Up, and ttkmeup.com is our website, which is linked to our Patreon, which is doing pretty well right now. And in the future, we're intending on doing special Patreon-only episodes. We want to do one on the O.J. Simpson 7-hour documentary that I've seen
a disaster
4 times, and
it's like 16 hours that you've spent watching the same O.J. Simpson documentary.
I said 4 times. Do your math.
Oh
no. And love. And so also we accept submissions for our Campfire Horror Stories minisode. And I'll be honest with y'all, if we're getting more submissions, y'all wouldn't have got this episode.
Yeah, so this is your fault.
So you can email us your submission at ttkmeup@gmail.com.
Yeah.
We will give you credit if you would like your voice to be heard. We're attracting all writers of every skill. Mm-hmm. We enjoy reading your work, and it's fun. God damn it.
It is fun.
Sorry, I sound a little angry. This isn't directed to you. This is just, I've had a long day and
it's just that nothing matters, and our entire political scheme is set up to benefit only white upper class men. Anyway, what else? We have a merch store through our website on ttkmeup.com. The merch store is through TeePublic. We have all sorts of goodies there, so pick up yours today.
We actually had our second meme sent to us by Cassidy, one of our patrons. We love seeing memes that y'all make, and it also lets me know that we are indeed keeping you up at night.
Thank God.
I
don't know what I'd do if I learned we weren't doing our job.
Yeah, can you imagine people are like, I try to listen to this before I go to sleep, and we're like, no!
The horror!
That would be something that truly keeps me up at night. My boyfriend is doing our next episode and wrapping up our Heavy Hitter series. And I almost forgotten, thankfully we went through this whole spiel. Our next series, as determined by a Twitter poll, is Fad Diets.
Which is gonna break my soul.
Oh, I'm so ready, and I'm gonna rage on Instagram memes because I see so many goddamn keto diet Instagram memes. I'm gonna lose my I sent this one to you. They always do these things that are like, instead of butter, why don't you use coconut oil, which is literally which is worse because it's entirely saturated fats. You can make the argument about it has like certain like antioxidants or whatever. You're literally using vegetable lard, but whatever. But I had one the other day that made me so viscerally upset. It was like, instead of having a coffee frappuccino, have a kale smoothie instead. And I'm like, that is not even close
How
to
can
the
you
same
link those
thing.
two?
And then also I saw one that was like, drink this tea when you're feeling like this. And it was like, when you have a slow metabolism, drink green tea. And I showed my friend Jacket, and he's like, you're telling me the symptoms of a slow metabolism are tired and is alleviated by the caffeine found in green tea?
Go
Wow.
figure.
And I was, yes, so I hate all of you individually. I hate you so much. And we'll be yelling about you in our next series. But before we do that, Matthew will be joining us and discussing something that I'm sure will keep us up at night.
I can't wait. Thank you for listening to us cry about the political schema of America.
Everything's pointless and we're doomed to die.
That's not
Nobody
true.
cares.
Maybe.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yes. Okay. We love you.
Oh, bye.
That's not true. Maybe we'll see is like our new catchphrase.
God. See you later, guys.
It's been real. Deuces.
Bye.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Micah.
Remember watching the Friends premiere?
No, I never saw that.
Oh, but remember those first Wu-Tang solo albums that came out?
No, I don't.
Remember that terrible Frasier theme song?
Oh my god. Remember I was sent away from home when I was 16, sent to like the middle of nowhere, Montana, therapeutic boarding school. None of this rings a bell?
Oh, yeah.
Join us for I Never Saw That, a podcast about mid-90s pop culture and Montana.
What about ER? You saw that, though, right?
No!